Welcome to episode 7 of Property Auction Watch, the show where we deep dive into some forthcoming properties coming up for sale at auction. In today's episode, we're looking at a donkey of a building plot for sale in Enfield, and we're also looking at 2 Santander bank branches in quite nice areas. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon because we put out new content each and every week, all dedicated to keeping you on top of your property investment game. This is Property Auction Watch, and the show wouldn't be the show without my auction entrepreneurs. To join me, Piotr Rusinek, Jay Howard, and Rod Turner. So first up is this donkey of a building plot over in Enfield, and that's one of my picks actually.
I remember some years ago at Auction House London, we sold something called Donkey Alley. So Donkey Lane's a little bit more tame, but still brilliant.
Have you been there? I mean, basically, you go down Lemon Road, you take a right on Turkey Avenue. Donkey Lane is the second on the left.
Okay, Ranjan, this is your pick. Tell us all about it.
So we're in Enfield now. It's a basically an unused site. It's a development plot.
Actually, it's not unused.
Well, it's
subject to tenancy for another 10 years.
But anyone is going to be looking
12 months.
Future redevelopment angle. So, you know, there's no planning permission that's been got. But what I find very interesting, can you just click on the third picture? I love these auction lots where there is just an artist impression of what it could be. And that's exactly what it is. It's just an artist impression of what you can do there, but there's no planning permission for this particular site. So what you have is a site with obvious development potential. There are houses next door. It's likely that you will get planning, and it seems as though you have a little bit of cash flow from the site at the moment. But we do have to bear in mind that this workshop, on the day the picture was taken, it's obviously shut. So it may be that they're not paying their rent at the moment, but that may or may not be an issue for the person purchasing this, because they will be looking at basically bringing the tenancy to an end so that they can develop the property out. But at the guide price and at the type of value of property that you can build on it, because basically even if you just extend the building line of what's next door, it'll certainly be in keeping with the area, and you'd get a decent house out of it.
I can see in the legal pack that there's a statutory declaration. I'm always interested when I see a stat dec included in the legal pack. This one looks like it's with regards to access. And there's a declaration for the occupational lease. Okay, a good couple of declarations in there just to provide some clarity for people. But I think it's apparent that there's potential for resi conversion based on the neighbouring properties to the left. But in reality, we all know that there's planning risk involved with something like this. But at base level, you know, it's an EN1 postcode, and again, following the Bhattacharya rules, a postcode that starts with a 1 can't be too bad. At the same time, I think it's got potential. I think that the income, I think you raised a good question about are they paying? And if so, you know, it's a decent yield for the area. And if they are paying, if they're paying whilst you're running the value add to maybe get planning or do whatever, then that's a winner. That's, you know, very much runs along the same parameters as the first deal that you presented in the last session.
Yes, but I think with the difference between this one is, you know, being as the auctioneer has probably tried to take the picture on the best light. They couldn't find a day when it was open to take the picture, which is a bit worrying. So it's likely that they are shut or packed up. Because a lot of businesses have simply packed up because of COVID.
But I think this one, what the test is, it's going to be a 12. The tenant's been in occupation for 16 years, and there will be a lease for a term of 12 months from the date of completion. So basically, they're agreeing to enter into a new lease from the date of completion. So they could easily withdraw that the kind of agreement if they felt the business is.
I mean, you're not buying this for the lease, are you?
No.
You're that's kind of a little Brucey bonus on top of while you're sitting there to get planning. Do we know the size of the actual existing building?
We know that the proposed dwellings that would occupy almost the whole site are 36 square meters on each, so about 75 square meters for the whole site. Not
including the parking or the terrace, but it's just as close an approximation as you're going to get.
And also, just to do some reading between the lines.
I like it.
Just to do some reading.
I think with this. Sorry, Ranjan.
I just wanted to do some reading between the lines on the seller situation. It may be, I haven't actually looked into it, but it may be because it's coming with a new lease to the existing occupier who's been there for 16 years and is having an extra year. It sounds to me that the vendor, the new lease is basically the guy who owns the freehold currently. And he's been thinking about doing this as a development. He's selling up, cashing in his chips, and he just wants to stay there for another year to sort himself out.
So it actually is looking like the tenant is someone who occupies 1 Donkey Lane, and this is 1A Donkey Lane. So probably someone living here occupies this property, and it looks like they agreed with the seller, Mr. Timothy Richard Down, to agree to a new lease. So it would be my suspicion as well, but I think
that plan doesn't add up with that photo of the front unless number one is on the is a different building. If you can look, if I'm looking at the red line plan, and then I'm looking at the other image, the front image,
yes,
which shows the houses next door. So it seems to be 2 of these sort of white kind of workshop things. Mm-hmm. Is it just one of them, or is it both of them?
It's both of them.
It looks to be both.
So these houses on the left of it are not in that plan. Then is that right?
Yeah, it must be an old plan.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting because there's already the precedent for those houses with the gardens, things like that. If it's a workshop, can you get PD and then look at enhanced planning? All these kind of things like fallback position and all that. It seems like a good one. There would be a bit of it's going to be valued on how likely people think they're going to get whatever building they're going to build on it, and that's really the big question: is it, are you really going to get 2-3 bed houses, or are you only ever at best going to be able to do the existing footprint of the building?
And you have hit the risk nail on the head. This is going to go to if someone pays too much for it, it'll be because they have just looked at the artist impression, looked at the plans in the pack, and said we're going to get 2 houses. Whereas if someone were to get a planning feasibility on this, they would probably find that to get those sort of family, because if you look at the back, they're only proposing terraces, and the neighboring properties have full gardens for those sort of family-sized units. And the planners are likely to say that if you're going to have a 3-bed family unit, that the amenity space is too small for that number of people in terms of providing those little terraces. So my feeling is that in reality, you won't be able to provide the amenity space for the 2 houses that they've shown in the mock-up. So
this is
whoever
what we're
buys
looking at.
Is going to need to have a very, very clear idea of what the planning policies are in that area, particularly with regards to amenity space that you have to provide for each family unit, because this one doesn't have as much garden space as some of the neighbouring ones.
Well, look at the development that's taken on there. I mean, you'd want to try and go for, to match the height of the neighbouring buildings to the left, right? if you're facing the site from the road, you'd want that 3-story, in which case you could be looking at a tidy block of studio or 1-bedroom flats.
No, you've made a really, really good point there. And I think what we're getting at is Nextdoor has taken on any of that garden space, and it's likely that they're going to say, I don't know, for example, there's 50 meters of outside amenity needed, in which case the back of your existing building would have to come down and act as that garden space and things like that. So it's looking more like you're better off, rather than getting 2-3-bed houses, well, you could do that with very small gardens. It just depends how much garden space you'd need for them. Or what might end up being a bit better is just roof terrace for apartments.
I'm interested, what's the current use of this property and what's been the historic use of this property?
It says workshop and it's in a residential area, isn't it? So historically, that would probably be, I always get confused, B1A or B.
That's right. So exactly. So B1A or B1C, which is the light industrial kind of stuff. And then you can go for permitted developments. If you go for permitted developments and get planning for like the change of use for up to 2 flats or 2 dwellings, then you can, the actual process of applying for planning permission and making this into houses that have got kind of slightly smaller amenity space, it's much more easy than if it was just a site that.
Yeah. But I think the point is they're not going to be as big as the Nextdoor ones because they won't
be.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
But still, I think I would be looking at this and thinking, look, let's go for the 2 houses option.
That's right. Yeah. But I think just looking at the Google map,
2 flats.
Yeah, looking at the Google Maps, I'm actually fairly excited about this, and I wasn't before when I was looking at the catalog entry, because this wasn't inspiring me with confidence. But looking at this, the depth of it and everything else, it's actually a pretty good site.
And what about is that a phone mast right outside that the picture's kind of blocking when you first look at it? When you look at the on the auction page, the photo of it.
You've got that wooden pole there. Yeah. It's connected to a phone mast. Yeah.
Is there any station right outside or anything like that? You'd obviously want to go and have a good look.
If you click on the auction house picture, there is a wire that runs from the back of it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, like this. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just want to check things like that. Obviously, have a look there. Also, access to parking, all that sort of stuff. Because you look down the little lane, and it's not the only workshop. There's a few others. So is there an opportunity there to maybe try and buy out those garages, and who do they belong to, and then put a bigger scheme in?
Yeah.
That's more of like that's more of like a land assemblage, really, isn't it? You want to kind of structure that.
It just makes things. It just gives you more options, doesn't it? And I think when you've got those things in place, actually, it gives you optionality, flexibility. If you know that those garages are there, and it doesn't need to be done now. It can be, go and have a look, have a knock on the door of who owns it. Look, are you ever interested in selling a garage? And down the line, okay, well, if this doesn't work, we can look at maybe this option. And I think you just want as many kind of options as you can for you to add value to it if you're going to be buying it.
The interesting thing for me is that you're already in a contractual relationship with the chap who's in next door, right? There's the new tenant on that 12-month commercial lease is at number 1, and this is 1A. So, it just requires that conversation. Maybe you do a JV and you increase the square footage and the developmental value or the planning scope of the site. I think that's got a lot of legs in it if that was the approach you take. But how much do you think this will sell for? I'm probably at the 180 mark.
That was going to be my guess as well, 180. And I think, this is pay 165 for it, yeah.
How big did we say that? about 100 square meters.
Yeah, it's about 100 square meters. Yeah, that's what David says in our chat.
So it's about 4,600 per square meter is a residential sort of end value. So at a worst case scenario, if you were getting that, I mean, you'd hope you get better, but to convert, I think it will go for over 2.
Over 2, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you pay that, or would you just say it would go for that?
I think I'd be very interested up to 200, and then I'll be thinking, right, I've got to do a lot more homework and be a lot more confident in.
Yeah, I think I don't think it'll exceed 200. But I want to suggest a little a strategy which is quite good for these sort of opportunities. Not necessarily this one, but a generic strategy. So it's when people are using their pension, you see. A great little number would be to buy a property like this, because at the moment it's commercial and it has no planning permission, and it will be valued based on purchase price and or the lease, commercial lease that is in place for a year. So you'd buy this in your pension, and then you would get the permission. You'd get the permission to convert to residential, and that will immediately, hopefully, double or more the value of that plot. And then your pension sells it on, and you've immediately locked in some great value into your pension. So for a savvy commercial pension player, this will be a bit of a laugh, as long as you know the planning rules in Enfield and what you can and can't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. And can you actually buy something like that with a pension in the auction? Is it easy, or is it
too... provider? I mean, a lot of them are too slow to buy in, but there are some that we work with who can do it in an auction timescale.
Mm-hmm.
SAS, this is particularly if you have SAS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So what are you saying this is going to sell for, Ranjan?
I don't think it'll go for more than a couple of hundred. If it goes for more than a couple of hundred, it's because someone's kind of thinking they're going to build what they have sketched out in the auction catalogue.
Yeah.
That's the danger here.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that deal in Donkey Lane? Tell me what you think in the comments below. If you're enjoying the content that we're putting out, don't forget to smash that like button as well. Next up, we all know that there are a ton of banks closing, and there are a lot of bank branches closing down, but there are a lot of bank buildings for sale. And we're looking at 2 Santander branches which are on sale by the same owner in the same auction.
Right, so this is lot 12 of the Allsop auction. It's 49 Woodcote Road in Wallington, SM60LG. It's the Santander Bank, which is on High Street, guided at 475,000 to 525,000. It's got an existing gross yield of just shy of 7%. 220 square meters. It's been in occupation by Santander for 20 years. And there is a recent, it recently renewed its lease just, I think, last month. And I think I'm right in saying there's a break in 5 years. I saw that somewhere.
There we go.
There's a reverse.
Reversion, 5 years, yeah.
So it's not too bad. They're confident in that area, which is why they've got a new. They signed up for another 5 years just last month. No, they have only done 5 years because I guess they just want to see how things are gonna go. They've got the whole building. So if you look at it, it's shop front with what looks like your typical Victorian residential uppers, and they're used at the moment as sort of storage, I guess, or offices. I mean, that's crying out to be converted into residential in a nice part of town. So I think that's the obvious one where you've got some decent kind of values as well for residential, which would do well there. So again, it's kind of similar to the last one. You're looking at what is the worst case scenario. Is having the tenant in as a worst case, and then what potential uplifts could you do for if and when they leave? And for me, that would be residential on the uppers, which would give just the residential part a value of a bit over 500 grand, probably more towards 550, and then you've still got that high street presence on the ground floor. So it's a fairly it's a bit more vanilla than some of the stuff we've looked at so far. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and so this one is part of a bigger portfolio being sold, about 15 Santanders in this auction.
Yeah.
And this whole portfolio is being sold by this same seller, Mapley Columbus Limited. And this is pretty much like one of the largest commercial landlords in the UK. And but their main strategy is to actually add value to like those commercial assets and sell them on, but they add value through leases. Yeah. So they just signed up all those 15 leases with Santander for their 5 years from December, and all of those are put in the auction. So pretty much right now, with every month that passes from that 5 years, the value of this asset is kind of deteriorating. So it's the best time to sell it, because with a 5-year lease.
I don't always look at it like that, because you can look at the bank has gone in there and they've obviously put some money in by having to move site and start getting operations set up. And they're always unlikely to do that unless they're looking at, like, do we want to be here for the foreseeable future? Having the break and the end of lease is their safety net, really. So they're not going to look at it going, we are leaving in 5 years. They'll probably be looking at it, right, we want to stay here as long as it's viable, but as our safety net, we can leave at that 5-year term. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is reducing the value as time goes on, but you still got a decent bank in a high street location, paying pretty good money, and there's some uplift on the uppers as well. And they've taken the whole building, which I found was quite interesting, and a bit like one of the ones we discussed. If at 5 years, I would expect that if you could quite easily renegotiate that to be just the ground floor, and you take the uppers off them.
That's right.
Yeah, that would be the play.
I think this one is really good to be discussed in like together with the one that I suggested, which is the Santander sold by the same seller in Chingford. And this one is offered with a yield of 6.751%, so slightly less than the one in Wellington. However, this one, there's a few things that I noticed from a kind of our research that make it very interesting. And those are the things. So it's in Chingford. It's kind of outside of the main Chingford area. It's kind of, I'll show you on the map. It's kind of more to Chingford Mount, and the main Chingford is over here. So it's still Chingford, but what I've really liked about this property is the fact that it's got clearly development potential going upwards. Number two is the rent is really low. It's £23,500. It's fairly easily replaceable, I think, for the building of this size, because it's fully let to Santander. It's got big development potential. The rent isn't overinflated for an asset like this. It's a fairly good residential area. Plus, look at the accommodation schedule. It says that the first floor is only 231 square feet, and all those numbers were taken from the VOA website. However, we looked at this quite in depth in our Auction Buyers Club calls, and let's look at the map of it, because I bet that first floor is massively bigger than 231 square feet, and the VOA office, for some reason, they only put 231 in there.
That will be the chargeable space, I would imagine, under business rates, whereas they might, what Santander might have done is then proportioned off part of it as maybe storage or something like that, and maybe the auction house has just misinterpreted that.
I think that is a big opportunity.
That happens quite often. We've actually bought buildings like this, and they take the measurements off the VOA, and now because of COVID, they do that. But the VOA only measures space that's assessed for business rates, and these will always have safes and vault space. And often those are walk-in vaults. They are walk-in vaults, and they're the size of rooms. I mean, and we bought one which you can fit a one-bedroom flat in, but that wasn't on the VOA as a measured area for rateable value. So it's basically free space once you got the vault out.
Yeah, and this building, this is the building. So downstairs is, according to the plans, is 1,400 square feet. So when you look at the map, if that's 1,400 square feet, then this has to be at least 1/3 or just above. So this would have to be about 450 to 500 square feet. And even comparing to those buildings there. So I think there's a lot of space that's not accounted for. And also, given the rent is low, you can pick up this asset based on the yield, because normally those assets sell based on yield. So if the rent is low, the actual capital value of the property will be low relatively to what it actually could be. So I think the two assets are very similar. I think this one is just more centrally located, given the bigger town center, a shopping center, while this one is in a very affluent area, but slightly off main town center.
Now, I've got a couple of things to say on this one, but I'd say firstly on your Chingford one, it's very interesting. They've got a number of Santander bank buildings in the auction sale. It's interesting that they've picked this one to feature as lot number one. And I would suggest that's to set the tone for the rest of the Santander lots in the sale. So they've picked one in a prosperous area. The thing with prosperous areas is there are prosperous people there and who have money. And a lot of those folks will be looking at, they walk by this every day. They walk by this for their cup of coffee and all of that. They live in the area and they quite fancy parking that away as part of their pension. And you tend to find this all the time. So a similar building in a less affluent area doesn't attract that sort of local interest because no one has that sort of money in the bank in the local surrounding area. So I would suggest the reason they've put this particular bank as lot number one is to set the tone for the rest of the catalogue and some of the other Santander lots further on. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's certainly got the development potential more than the other ones that I've seen. So yeah.
That's very good thinking. I didn't think of it like that, but actually because they've got like 15 of the same kind of type of asset. If this one sells for 5% yield, and it might, then it will set the tone for the other Santanders to sell for similar amounts. And
Jay, since you've worked in the auction industry, is there a science behind where lots actually feature in a catalogue, or is it just a toss-up of a dice?
Well, no. The auction firm that I worked in, there was pure science behind it. It wasn't just a case of this goes here or that goes there. There is a science behind putting certain lots at certain intervals to keep the bidding busy. That was very much the case for the in-room auctions. I imagine, the firm that I worked for, they do the live stream, so not much would have changed there. But if you had 3 or 4 similar types of properties in the catalogue, you would probably put the more attractive one first, as you say, to set the tone. That's a very interesting point, a very, very interesting point to make, one that probably a lot of people wouldn't have picked up on initially.
The other thing I'd say about Santander ones is that there is, and Rod picked up on this. There's just a trend towards shorter leases. People don't want to commit, even big companies with sound businesses. I think Santander are likely to stay in the prosperous areas. They tend to like to stay in those locations. It's the unprosperous areas they want to move out of. But that being said, they still want the flexibility of shorter leases. But the problem this has for landlords is that if you had a 20-year lease and now you've got a 5-year lease, it actually robs some of the value of the freehold. But the way to look at this is that robbing of value has already happened with the existing owner has taken that hit. And now you've got to look at it based on a 5-year lease to a great tenant. And my view is value it based on a 5-year lease and value it based on if it became empty, are you better off with the property being empty because it's got development potential? If that's the case, then that's great. What you got to lose?
Right.
Yeah, then you have to consider the price that you're going to pay at some kind of hedged level, right? And that means that you're not necessarily paying for a price on yield at the current market rate. You're kind of future proofing to a degree, and that's where the next question becomes really very interesting. How much would you pay for it, or how much do you think it would sell for?
Which ones are we looking at? Which one should we start with?
Should we start with the Wallington one then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put the picture up again.
Yeah, let's do it. 475, 525. I think this one is gonna sell for about. I think both are gonna sell. This one 5.5%, and the other one 5.25%.
Well, I think that's too high actually for this one. I think because I would be buying this as a yield play for the next 5 years, assuming that in 5 years' time you then get the uplift. And I think a 5.5% yield is too expensive to wait that long, because look at who the buyers are going to be for it. You've got to have someone right in the middle of, you're prepared to do work, but you also want to leave it and collect the income. And so you are in a bit of no man's land there. So I think it will be going not far over that guide price, I would have thought.
So around 525, 550.
Yeah, I'd say let's go with 540.
540. Okay.
I think you're probably right. That's probably the kind of area it would sell at, but I wouldn't be any more than 500 on this myself.
Okay. 500 and 540 more or less. And Ranjan, what do you say?
We bought something before Christmas, a double shop. The shops are let, and the 2 floors were vacant offices, and we bought it on the basis of 5.5% yield on the income producing shops. But what we have is the ability, and we're putting in permitted development at the moment to convert the offices into flats above. So the conversion potential is immediate, as opposed to not waiting. So we paid 5.5% yield based on the shop income, but we have immediate development potential on the upstairs because it's empty and we can do it now. So based on that, I would expect a much higher yield if I don't have that immediate uplift potential. So I would be looking at pretty similar to guide, actually, if I'm 5 years away from putting spade in the ground and doing some conversion works.
Okay, so around 525 for this one?
No, I'd say much higher. So I think it's much more at the guide price. Certainly not. I'd be looking for
much more than the guide price.
In excess of 6.5.
Oh, so you mean?
I'd want more yield, basically, because I can't put spade in the ground and do the conversion works for a minimum of 5 years.
Okay, so around 475 you would pay for this?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I'm going to be bullish. I think it's going to sell for about 5.5% yields, and which is 600K.
Well, mark this in your diaries, ladies and gents. Piotr's gone bullish.
I think this one and this one I'm gonna save on 5.25%, which would be what? Let's just do the numbers. 23,500 divided by 0.525. That's 447k. Okay, maybe that's a little lot. 425.
So what do you think of those? Are those bank buildings a deal that you can bank on? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, make sure you do so, because when you subscribe and hit the bell icon, you'll know as soon as we upload new content like this. There'll be plenty more from Auction Watch, so stay tuned, keep watching our channel, and see you guys in the next video.